Hey everybody, welcome to Mammoth Interactive's YouTube channel. First of all, I want to thank you for watching this video. And remember that this channel doesn't do Patreon. Instead, we sell our digital courses down below. And every single dollar that we get from the products you buy below goes into making more content. The best way to help out this channel and Mammoth Interactive is to subscribe to Mammoth Interactive's huge library of content. Get thousands of hours and hundreds of courses for a low price down below. We have a monthly option and a yearly option. Thanks for listening, and I'll see you in the video.
Hello everyone, and welcome back to our course. In this lecture, we're getting started with building our first Flask app right here in Google Colab. All right, so make sure you go to colab.research.google.com. You can find here the link for you. You just have to go to colab.research.google.com where you can instantly start coding in Python. And yes, you can use Flask right here in Google Colab. You can also install Flask right onto your computer. That's another option if you don't want to code online. All right, great. So once you've visited Google Colab, join me and we'll get started. We're going to make a new code cell here, and we're going to begin by importing Flask. Now, Flask is actually pre-installed into Google Colab, so you don't have to install it. If you are using a different code editor, you will have to install Flask first, but here in Google Colab, we can just immediately start using Flask. For example, from Flask, we can import the Flask object. And this represents Flask, and we can immediately start using it to build our application. So once we've imported in Flask, we are going to then create a new app variable, which represents our Flask object. And we're going to instantiate a new Flask object just like this. We're making a new instance of the class Flask to have this new Flask object. In here, we're going to pass in a variable or a parameter known as __name __. Don't worry about this too much, but this is how Flask determines the best way to import other files and modules into your app. When our file is run, this argument name, it's going to be resolved to __main __. All right, so just like that, we have a new instance of Flask. Then, in order to run Flask in Google Colab, we have to use a helper known as Flask and Grok. So I'm going to create a new code cell and just move it above the first. And I'm going to install Flask and Grok. It's required to run Flask on Google Colab because Google Colab doesn't allow you to access local host files. So that's why we have to use this helper Flask and Grok if we want to run our app via Google Colab. So I'm going to access the console here in Google Colab by opening up the exclamation mark key. Then I'm going to call pip install flask -n grok. So this is going to access the console or the terminal, and it's going to install via pip this Flask and Grok. Then I'm going to run this code cell and we will see exactly that. We're going to see that it's going to install Flask and Grok for us. Okay, here we go. You can see we're collecting Flask and Grok, then we are installing it. Some requirements are already satisfied, meaning Google Colab already has Flask, requests, click, etc., which we all need for Flask and Grok to work. And then we've installed that package, and we get the message that we successfully installed that. Awesome. Okay, so now that we have installed ngrok, we can import it. So I'm going to add here from Flask _ngrok, which is that package that we just installed. I am going to import a function that we need known as run with ngrok. So we do have access to the whole package, but we only need this function from the package known as run with ngrok. This will allow us to run an app with this package because that's the only way that we can actually run it in Google Colab. Okay, and now that we have our app instantiated, we're then going to call that function run with ngrok, and we are going to pass in our app. So we are going to start ngrok when the app is run. This function is going to perform all the functionality for us of starting the app. Okay, so I can run this cell already and we'll see no issues. Next, how do we actually start launching the site? Well, what we're going to do is open up an if statement and we'll check if that name argument here if that is equal to __ main, which it will be compiled to that when we run the app, then we are going to call app.run. So whenever we run our app, then this name is always going to be resolved to main. But just in case there is a different name that we want to use, we do have to add this check. Then we're going to call app.run, which will actually launch the app. So we can test this out now. We can hit run on this cell, and look at this. We'll get this message here that says serving Flask app __ main. The environment is a production deployment environment, but we do get this warning that this is a development server. So because it's Google Colab, it's for development, not really production. If we want to actually produce the app and publish it, then we would use a different server. We can turn debug mode on or off, and then we get this other line running on this server location. So if we click on this link, we'll be taken to that exact location. Okay, and I'm just going to refresh. Okay, so this first line here, this server would only work if we were off Google Colab. Because we're on Google Colab, we have to use this second link, which is the ngrok link. So that's why we installed ngrok, because if you try to use this 127.0.0 500 port 500 to access the app, then it won't actually work, because that doesn't work with Google Colab. But if you click on this second link, then that actually will work. So it's different from the site can't be reached. We do still get a 404 message, but this 404 message is actually the 404 message that we don't have the URL on the server. But the server is still running. It's just the URL not found, which we're going to implement. We have to implement the URL before it can be found. You can also see traffic stats if you're off Google Colab. All right, and now that we have gotten the server running, we're actually going to enable the page to load. So we can click stop to stop the server, or hit Control-C as well to quit. I'm going to stop the cell from running, and that is going to also close the server. Next, in order to actually see a page that on the server, we have to add what's known as a route. So make sure it's before this app.run line, because once that line executes, then the cell is just going to keep running endlessly because the server is running. So make sure any code you write is above that line of app.run. What I'm going to do is add a new route with @app.route. This allows me to create a new route with my Flask app, and I'm going to start with the route of a /, which means just the first page that is loaded. So just like your home page, if you had www.mammothinteractive.com, it would just be that home page, no pages inside. Then I'm going to define a function immediately below the route, and that is going to be what happens when the route is called, or when your user or your client visits that exact page. So I'm going to define here my index, which is typically the name that you will give that home page file. So the function is called index, and then I open up the colon because it's the function header and hit enter. Make sure you have this tab, and then I'm going to fill in the function body. The function body is going to be returning something like welcome to the index. So this define index function, because it's right below the route, it's going to run whenever that route is activated, and it's going to return some text. So now if I rerun my code cell, I'm going to see not the no page error, but I'm actually going to see the page that I have added a route for. So make sure you click on this link again, because every time you rerun the code cell, the ngrok link will change. So you will have to click on this link again. The old link will no longer work. And look at this. Now we have this message, welcome to the index. This old page, it uses the old link, so it no longer works. If you refresh it, you'll get this message, tunnel not found, because you're now using a different link because we reran the code cell. And then this server 127 at port 5000, that's not going to work because we're not on Google Colab. But this here, this new ngrok link, it now shows welcome to the index. And that's because we've now accounted for that route. The route is just a /, meaning it's the server with nothing at the end. If I added something after it, like hello, well then I would get a not found message again because we haven't handled that route. If I just go to a /, then I'll go back to the route that I've handled, welcome to the index. But if I type anything after that, such as welcome, well, I haven't handled that route yet, so I'll get this not found message. Only the route that you have enabled is going to actually work. So look at that, we now have our first page. And just like that, we have been able to set up a server with Flask and also show our first page, this home page. Also commonly handled with the index function as per convention. We can handle other pages as well. For example, all we have to do is add another route. So I'll just kill this code cell, and then I'm going to add another route handler, so app.route, and I'm going to handle another page. For example, perhaps the about page. So I'm going to add this at followed by app.route, and it's like the precursor to the function because it's using the ampersand or the @ sign. So it's the precursor to the function here, which is what happens when the route is activated. So in this case, I'm activating another route known as the about page. So if the user goes to the about page, if my client goes to my website or my ngrok link here, /about, then I can define what I want to show them. So I'm going to define another function. It has to be a new name. I'll call this about to match the about page. And then I can return some new string here, such as about us. So now I'm handling two pages, the index and also /about. So let's rerun the code cell again. And we do have to click on this ngrok link again because it has changed. We now have a new ngrok link because we reran the code cell. Anytime you rerun the code cell, you'll get a new ngrok link. All right, and you could also move the content above if you wanted to. We can try that later. But here, okay, let's try this again. Now I am on my link again. This time if I go to /about, look at that. Now I have my second page that says about us. And I can go back to the index page or forward to the about page. Any other page though, such as Mammoth, that still doesn't work. Only the routes that we handled will work. Awesome, so let's kill that code cell. And we can also just separate our code here. For example, we could cut the previous half and add a new code cell and paste it there. And we can run this. Then we can run this code cell again. But because our code here, if name equals main, is what's actually running the app and launching a new ngrok server, then that is going to refresh every time. So we will have to change that link every time, even if we separate this code cell, because the actual line that's launching the server is this final line of app.run. Awesome. All right, now that we know how to create a Flask app and how to also launch the server, let's join us in the next lecture where we're going to learn how we can render HTML. So not just strings, but actually we can render HTML content with our Flask apps. Join me in the next lecture where we will work on that. Hello everyone and welcome back to our course. In the previous lecture, you learned how to set up your first Flask app as well as different routes to enable different pages of the site. Next up, I'm going to show you how we can render not just strings, but actually HTML code and HTML tags inside of different routes. So, for example, let's replace this index function. Instead of returning a string, let's return HTML. So I'm going to start by creating an h1 tag, and I'm going to close it immediately so I don't forget. And note that it's inside of 2 quotation marks. So it's still a string that's being returned, but it's going to be parsed into HTML. This h1 is a heading 1, meaning a large heading, the most primary heading. And I'm going to call this welcome. So I'm going to just have this text welcome inside of a heading 1 HTML tag. So now if I rerun my code cell here, okay, well, I am going to just make sure this is run first, then run the second code cell. So that's why it's often easier to just have it all in one, because then you won't have to run the cells multiple times. Then I can go to the Grok page and look at that. Now I have welcome as this large heading 1 that's also bolded, which is the default formatting for a heading 1. And this was just the old page, by the way. We can just close that now. Okay, next, we can also add more tags right here. So I can add in a paragraph as well under construction, and then I can close that paragraph tag. Then I can rerun the cell. Okay, I'm just going to put this all into one because otherwise it's going to force me to run the code cells separately. So then I'll rerun this code cell, and now I have a new server link. And look, now we have a heading 1 and we have a paragraph as well. Furthermore, we can create different pages as well. So I'm just going to kill this code cell and let's add another page. So we can actually have routes that are as deep as we want. For example, let's make a new app.route that goes to /profile/mammoth. So we're actually going deeper into the map of the site. We're going into the page profile and then into the sub page of mammoth. So perhaps this is someone's profile. This is another route, and I can define another function, profile. And again, I can return some content here. I could return a heading 2 this time. Welcome to profile mammoth, and I can close that heading 2. Now if I run this code cell again, I can check out what we have now. So this is just the default page of the server, which is just the index page. But if I add now a /profile/mammoth and hit enter, look at that. Now we have this heading 2, welcome to profile mammoth. So now we have another route just like that. And again, we're showing HTML here. Furthermore, we can pass not just direct hard-coded literal strings here, like profile/mammoth, but what if we had multiple profiles, not just mammoth, but what if we wanted a dynamic profile? Well, we can actually use arguments directly inside of a route. Let me show you. What if I wanted to handle multiple profiles or multiple products? I'm going to add app.route again to make a new route. This time I'll do product/ and then I'm going to add an argument known as name. And I'm just doing this instead of profile because otherwise they would conflict. Okay, so here I have product as a page and then a sub page of name. But this name here, it's not actually going to be a literal name like mammoth. It's actually going to be whatever name I pass in. Because I'm using these alligator brackets, these triangular brackets, then that means the name inside of the triangular brackets, that's going to be treated as an argument, which means I can use anything I want right here, and it's going to get stored as name. So you may be wondering, how do I handle that argument? Well, I'm going to define a function here. Let's call this product page. And just like usual, I can return some HTML here, such as a heading 3 that says product, right? But how do I actually use the name of that product? Well, what I can do is just pass it right in as a parameter of the function that's attached to the route. Remember, the function that's directly below the route is attached to the route, so it has access to this route information, which is this name argument. So I can just pass that directly in there without alligator brackets. And then I can use that name argument anywhere I want inside of this function. For example, I can return product, and then I can also put in here the product name. So let me put in here, the string will be product, but then I'll add the name, and then I'll close the string. So here it's just the same heading 3, but I just put the name right in the middle of it. So let me show you the results. If I run my code cell here, and then I'm going to access the Grok server, then I am going to go to the location, which is product slash any name I want, such as, let's do book. Okay, so that will be one product. Look at this. Now we have product book that has appeared on the page because Flask has taken the argument, which was name. In this case, the name is book, and it's substituted that variable with its value book. So I could do this with anything. I do this with phone, and then I'll see product phone instead. So that's how we can have dynamic pages, and we can handle multiple routes at once, because making a route for every single page, if you have millions of profiles or millions of products, that will take forever. So that's why instead we can use arguments to handle all products at once. So here we're creating a heading 3, but we're just putting in the name. And note that I have to put it in here as a concatenation or addition of strings, because if I just put in name right here, well then this name is just going to be a string. If I want to actually make sure it's a variable, then I have to ensure that I have the string, then I put in the variable, then I close that string. And that's because this name is an argument. It's not a string like product. Awesome. And we can actually have multiple arguments as well. For example, I can handle more deeper pages with more arguments. For example, I can do app.route, and I can go to /product/name/price. So now I have 2 arguments inside of my route, and I just have to make sure I handle both of them. So I'm going to define here product, let's do product information. And I have to handle both name and price this time as the parameters that are accepted by the function. And this time I'm going to return here. I will return, let's do a heading 4, how about just for some change. And I'm going to say about, and then I'm going to add the name, and then I'm going to add a colon, and I have to close that heading 4. Then I'm going to add a paragraph that says price, and I'm going to add the price argument right there, and then I'm going to close that paragraph, just like this. Make sure you have a plus here, because after the name of every argument, you have to have a plus, because we're concatenating all of this content together. We're taking about, we are adding the value of name, we're adding this string, then we're adding the value of price, then we're adding a final string. And make sure you don't have a colon after the route as well. That's just the function heading, so we don't need a colon there. Then let's rerun the code cell and we will try this out. I'm going to run this server again. We have our welcome page, and now let's go to our page of product, and let's make up a product like book. Then let's add a price such as 30. Then I'll hit enter, and look at this. Now I see about book, that's my heading 4. Then I have my price, which is 30. And I can change that route with anything I want, such as I could do computer, and I could do a price of 9,000. And if I hit enter, look at that. All of the content gets filled in. All of the arguments get filled in with their values. And that's thanks to using arguments. All the other pages still work. We can still go to product/computer, and then we'll just get product computer. We could still go to profile/mammoth, and we'll get welcome to profile mammoth. Awesome. And that is how we can build routes that contain HTML content, and as well routes that accept arguments, which will enable us to handle many pages at once, which is very important for any website. Now, for this HTML, it has to be all returned as one string, which can get quite messy if you have a complex page, because most pages are more complex than just some heading 1 in a paragraph. So next up, we're going to learn how can we replace this string with an actual full-fledged HTML page, so like a full-fledged web page. That is exactly what we'll learn how to do in the next lecture. Hello everyone, and welcome back to our course. In the previous lecture, you learned how to show HTML in your routes, and also how to use arguments to have dynamic pages. Next up in this lecture, we're going to learn how we can show not just HTML content directly here in our file, but we're going to learn how we can create HTML templates. So let's get started by adding a new route. I am going to create a new route and I will call it my first template. Then I'm going to make a function to handle that route and I'm going to call it first template. Then here I'm going to return a function known as render template, and we actually have to import this function. So I'm going to import it alongside Flask because it comes from Flask, but other than just the Flask object, we need that function known as render template. So make sure you import it. Then that will allow us to actually use that function. This function is going to render an HTML template at that route. So we can actually create a separate HTML file and render it whenever we go to this route. Let's call this HTML file my first underscore template.html. Okay, then we have to now create this HTML file. So you're going to need to use a text editor, a notepad, or a code editor in order to create an HTML file. So in my case, I'm just going to use the text edit app, but you can use any note-taking app or even better, a code editor. But just in case you don't want to install a code editor, I'm going to show you how you can just use text edit, which comes with any Mac computer. And if you're on a different computer like Windows or Linux, you can use just any text editor or notepad. Okay, here we have an untitled blank text file. And I'm going to show you how we can make an HTML file out of this. All right, so for that, we're just going to have to put in some HTML right here. So I'm going to create a new heading 1, and let's call this my first template, and then I'll close the heading 1. Then I have to go to text edit preferences and just make sure that the format, number 1, the format type is plain text instead of rich text. And as well, in open and save, make sure you have this selected to display HTML files as HTML code instead of formatted text. We need to enable this because otherwise we'll just see the code whenever we run the file. We won't actually see it as HTML. So we have to make sure this is enabled because it's not enabled as default. By default, this is not going to be enabled, and also by default, the format is rich text, not plain text. So just be aware of those two things. Okay, then we can go ahead and save this file. I am going to just call this first template, which is exactly what we referenced in Google Colab. And then make sure that the plain text encoding is UTF-8. This is the standard text encoding for websites. As well, the extension is going to be .html because we're making an HTML file after all. We're not making a text file. And save it in your project folder. I have this subfolder called templates as well. Then hit save, and we do want to indeed use .html instead of .txt. So now you'll have first dash template, and the extension is .html. Now, if you open that file inside of your browser, for example, I'm going to locate that file in my folder, and if I double click it, it will actually open in my default browser, which in this case is Chrome. And look at that, we have my first template. And the path is just the path of where this HTML file exists in my computer. It's just the path to the file. Awesome. Okay, so that is how we can create this HTML file. Now, how do we then show that HTML file on Google Colab? Because Google Colab, it doesn't have access to your computer. You have to actually upload files if you ever want them to be usable. Click on the folder icon on the left, and then click on the 2 dots or the ellipses to go up 1 level. This is going to contain all of our files, and we can add a new file for the first template.html. First, we want to make sure we collect all our templates inside of a folder. So I'm going to just right-click and add a new folder, and I'm going to call it templates. That is going to create that templates folder here in my files. And then I'm going to upload the file right here into the templates folder. So just right-click on the templates folder and click upload. Then you can select that template that we just created, the HTML file, and hit open. You will get this reminder that uploaded files will get deleted when the runtime is recycled. Then hit OK, and that is going to upload first template.html into that templates folder, and that will allow you to access first template.html. Now, for actually accessing this file, you have to also specify the templates folder, because by default, Flask looks inside of its default location or path for the templates folder, and we want to override that because we're using Google Colab. So up here, when I instantiate the app, I'm going to also specify the template folder argument. So I'm going to specify template folder, and here I'm going to pass in the path to where my template folder resides, because Flask will use its own by default, but we want to override that. So inside of the files page here, I want to right-click on the templates folder and select copy path. Then I'm going to paste that path as the template folder path, which is just /templates. So you want to make sure you include this, because otherwise Flask will not be able to find the templates folder you want. It will use its own path. And now that we've overridden the templates folder, we can now put to use all of the templates inside of our folder. Currently, we only have one called first template.html. One thing that's very important to note is we actually cannot have a dash in our HTML file name. It has to be an underscore. Otherwise, that's going to conflict with the route location. A route is going to be having a dash in between the words as per convention, but an HTML file can only have an underscore. Otherwise, it will conflict. So let's make sure we replace all of the dashes in the HTML file with an underscore instead. So we are going to delete our HTML file here, or we can also just rename it right there, first underscore template. I'm also going to just rename it on my computer as well for my own reference. So make sure that the route has a dash in the name, but the HTML file has an underscore. Otherwise, they will conflict. Now we can run this code cell and let's test this out. I'm going to launch that server and I'm going to visit the page first template. And look at that. We can now see my first template. We got that page running. We can add as many templates as we want with as much complex HTML as we want. All we have to do is just create a route for it, then create an HTML file for it, and just like that, we can launch an HTML file and serve an HTML file for that exact route. Awesome. Next up, I'm going to show you how we can build dynamic page templates. So instead of having to build a new HTML file for every single page that we want, we can actually build dynamic pages that will allow us to reuse HTML files, and that will save us a lot of time. So join us in the next lecture where we will work on that.
Hey everyone, thanks for watching this course. If you want to watch the rest of the course, the link is down below. Not only will you get the access to this course, but you'll get access to a lot of other courses in a huge bundle, and it's on sale today. So buy before the sale ends. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in another video.